What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to animate a sprite in Python using PyGame. We'll do jumping, crouching, left and right movement, and idling movement, and we'll cover it start to finish. So I'm super excited about today's tutorial. We've done a ton of Python and PyGame tutorials on the channel, and something we don't do in most of our games is add this like multi-layered animation where you have like a character that actually changes states as you do these different things. And it's a super cool, super useful piece of really taking your games to the next step. It's just most of the games we've done on this channel have been kind of basic introductions. And so this one is really going to cover a super critical piece of making like advanced games. And what I really like about this one is it's actually not too hard. It's just a little bit time consuming on the art side of things, but we'll talk about ways that you can bring in outside art and things like that if you don't want to create every frame on your own. But we'll also talk about how you can do it on your own if you want to as well. So let's just go ahead and get started. So you can see the character that I'm going to be using is one I actually drew all of these frames, and I don't want any mean comments about how terrible my art skills are, because I know. But I drew this little alien boy, and I will show you how I did that. So I used a free online tool called Pixel Art, Pixil art.com, and you can just come in here, you can choose any size canvas you want, and you can, it's basically like Paint on the computer, and they have useful tools, and you can create all of these frames, and every time you add a frame, it can give you, you can kind of see in the background, it'll give you the previous frame. So if you want to draw something referring to a previous frame, that's how you can do it. So that's kind of how you take like walking movement and you make sure it looks sort of like the previous movement. So because this isn't actually a game I'm releasing, it's just a tutorial I wanted to show you, I have two frames of what the guy looks like idling. So it's just between these two. And I have this frame I'm going to use while he's in air. And basically all I did for this one is I moved him up a little bit, pointed his feet and his arms kind of out like he's falling. And then in the next frame, I have him crouching, so I just kind of squashed him down here a little. And again, this is where you as an artist, or you can even outsource the art to someone else, but this is where you want to spend the time for this kind of thing. Because once we get to the Python PyGame piece, it's not too bad. But this is what's called creating basically your sprite sheet or your different keyframes for your character's animation. So these are him walking, these two, and I'm just going to flip those same two frames. So if you use Pixel Art or a similar thing, you can just download everything you have, and if you don't want it as a pre-built GIF, whatever, don't come after me for pronunciation, then you can go to export frames and you can do all, and it's going to give you a zip folder with all of these one frame at a time. And if you have a computer that automatically puts like a white background, even though they shouldn't have any background when you just draw them like this, there's also a website you can go to that's just removebg.com, and you can upload the photos with a background, and this is going to automatically convert it to no background image, and then you can download it. There's also, if you want to, it's called, I believe, Open Game Art. So yeah, opengameart.org is a great website if you don't want to do the art piece of your game on your own. You can just come in here and you can type and search for things like you can just type in sprite sheet, and you'll be able to get some sprite sheets that people have just made for free. If you are going to release the game, make sure that you click on one that specifically says like for profit, royalty free. Most of them will specify. Some of them are just here so you can use them on personal projects, but then some of them they want you to like let them know or give them credit if you monetize. Just make sure you read the whole description before you release anything. But Open Game Art is a great site if you don't feel like drawing your characters, and you can tell I'm not that good at art, so maybe I should have gone with Open Game Art, but I wanted to show how you can make your own art as well. So what I did then is I downloaded all of my frames and I put them inside of this assets folder. So I recommend you do this when you create a new project. Make a folder, call it assets or frames or images or something, and copy every key frame, every image that you need in there. And when you click on them, you can actually view them in Python if you're using a good IDE. I use PyCharm. I like it a lot, but most IDEs, you can view images right inside of your development environment. Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of all of this code, and we'll do it together. So if you want to start by importing PyGame and doing PyGame.init to initialize the PyGame module. I always import random when I make new games. You don't actually need this just for our tutorial today, but most games you're going to want some type of RNG to kind of randomize, change the experience every game. That's a super useful module if you're putting any kind of AI or decision-making computerized stuff in there and you don't want it to be fixed and hard-coded. But okay, so first thing is import PyGame, PyGame.init, and just really quickly, I'm going to blast through setting up the game board. There are some more in-depth tutorials on the channel if you need to know where all of this is coming from, and I have covered it in a lot of tutorials, and the real focus of this one is the animation, not just the game setup. So I'm going to assume you know kind of how to set up a game and speed through this a little bit. I always create a lot of these variables up front, just so like FPS, a few colors, just so I don't have to do any hard thinking when I get to actually needing them in the game. So set up the screen by doing pygame.display.setMode, and then just give it a width and a height, and I always put my width and height in variables so I can just address it like that. But if you want to hard code it, then just make sure you replace where I put width and height with your actual X and Y dimensions. And then it's a good idea to just set caption at the beginning too, just with the name of your game. Since my little guy is an alien boy, I'm going to call it Alien Boy. And then always, especially for animation, you need to have a clock. So you want pygame.time.clock. You want to store that in a variable with some kind of logical name. I always call mine timer. And then we're gonna just do that so that we can get the screen opened up, and then we'll start adding stuff to it. So now let's make our main game loop. Running equals true while running. And then we're going to do a few things every time. Timer.tick at the frame rate, at our FPS. And then screen.fill. Oops, these should be indented. Okay, and then screen.fill, background color, we'll make it gray. All right, now let's go ahead and add event handling just so we have an exit condition. So if event.type is equal to pygame.quit, then running is equal to false. And actually we need to put this all inside of a event loop, which is going to be for event in pygame.event.get. So pygame.event.get is going to go out and get everything happening on the computer, in the system, on the keyboard, everything. And then if event.type is quit, then we'll set running equal to false. And then all we have to do after that is pygame.display.flip and pygame.quit. Okay. And so if I run this, it should give us int is not, oh yeah, you don't need parentheses after that quit. There we go. So we just get a screen with a gray background. Now, since we're going to put a player on here, let's make a floor real quick. Let's just go to where we fill the background. So we fill it with gray. Let's make a line first, floor, line, and let's go ahead and do pygame.draw.line screen. Let's make it a black line, and then we just give it two things. We give it a starting position and an end position. I'm going to go with 0 to 300, or 0 300 for starting position, and then width 300 for ending position. And I'm going to make this a thick line. So that's about where I want the floor to be. That's going to work for the game. I think it'll be fine. You play around with the style all you want. And then we'll draw the actual floor as a rectangle. So pygame.draw.rect. And we'll put that on the screen as well. And then we give it, we'll make this floor white. And then we are going to give it 4 arguments for a rectangle. So starting position, and we'll do 0 300. and then how wide we want it to be, we'll do the whole width, and then how tall we want it to be, we'll make it the height minus 300. And actually draw this floor before you do the line for your floor, and that'll give you where you want it. Yep. So I like that, and the reason I did that now is we're going to start drawing the character onto the screen, and this is the important part. So what we're going to do is we are going to make the player, and the player is going to be an image. So player equals pygame.image.load, and that's what you need to use, pygame.image.load, and then you tell it what image to load. So if we had if we had one frame and that was what it was going to look like the whole time, then you would just do assets and then backslash or forward slash assets forward slash and then the name of whichever your frame was. So let's say it was going to be idle1, just so we can get something on the screen, forward slash idle1 png, and then you could just do it like that, and that's gonna define the image that the player is going to be using. But then you have to actually blit it onto the screen. So blit is block transfer, I think that's what it stands for, but it's basically what you have to do in Pygame to draw things that aren't using the pygame.draw method. So if it's not a rectangle or a circle or a line, if it's something like text or an image, you have to use screen.blit, and then you give it the name of the object it's drawing onto the screen. So in this case we called it player, and then give it an X and Y. So just for now, I'll put it at 200, 200, just so we can see what's going on here. Okay, and so you can see my little guy there. That's cool. We got an image onto the screen, and it's kind of fun. But let's do a couple things just so you can see some useful tools in Pygame. We'll do pygame.transform.scale, and this is going to be just what it sounds like. We are going to scale that up a little bit because it looked pretty small. And you can also change the size of your objects outside of Python. Like you could edit them in Paint or Photos or whatever, but you can scale it right in Python. So I just changed it to 150, 150. Let's go ahead and see. And you can already see it's much bigger. It's more of a feature in the game. So that already looks a little bit better. And now let's make player X and player Y variables. In any game where you're going to be moving a character around, you're going to want to draw them with X and Y coordinates as variables, because obviously when we go left, we're going to be modifying the player X coordinate. And when you jump or crouch, you might be modifying the player Y coordinate. So we'll go ahead and make it 200, 200, but we'll make those variables. So that's all we need to do for now. But we also obviously aren't just using one. We aren't just using one picture the whole time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a list, and I'm going to say frames equals, and I'm going to make this empty list. But now I'm going to start adding the assets to it. So I'm going to come in, and this is going to be a little bit tedious. So feel free to speed it up or skip forward if you want, but I'm gonna make a list with all of my images in there. So I have idle 1, I have idle 2, I have crouch, I have jump, and also if you name these things sequentially, like if you had idle 0 through 10, you could use a for loop to add them to the list, something like that, so you're not just typing away all day. That's definitely valid. I only have like 7 images, so I'm going to do it this way. Left 1, left 2, and you'll see why I want these all in a frames list in just a second if you don't already know. It's going to be super easy when we need to change from one state to another. All we do is we change the index of our frames list that we call. So let's go ahead and say, okay, I always put a new line character. I guess it doesn't need it. So now instead of this naming it here, we're going to say frames at, and then I'm going to say active frame. And so I'm going to make a new variable called active frame. And when I start up my game, I'm going to call it I'm going to set it equal to 0. So basically that first idle image is going to be what loads in the beginning of the game. So nothing's changed yet, but now I can change active frame throughout my game. And you can see he's not jumping, so it's a little premature, but this is all we have to do to get the character to update is to update the active frame variable throughout. So that's all we have to do there. And now let's actually start creating the animation. So if we go down into our event handling, where we have the event type pygame.quit, we're going to do a new one for if event.type is equal to, and this time it'll be pygame.keyDown. So that's when you press a key and you're holding it down. And we'll start doing some checks. So we'll say if event.key is equal to, and the first one we'll do is write. We'll say pygame.k_write, and then we'll say, so if that's the case, we'll set mode equal to 1. And let's create a new variable called mode, and it'll start out as 0. And so I'll say right in here, 0 equals idle, 1 equals right, we'll say 2 equals left, 3 equals jumping, and 4 equals crouching. And we'll use this mode variable because in a lot of the states, in going left and going right and in idling, we have 2 states. So we can't just use active frame super easily. We can't just say, like, if I'm going right, set active frame equal to right, because it's 2 different frames. So we're going to create a function to actually check what mode it's in and use that mode to animate it. And then that'll set the active condition. So let's keep doing that. So if we're going right, then we'll set mode equal to 1. If we're going left, we'll set mode equal to 2. Let's see. If we press down, that'll be what crouch is, and I think we said 4 for crouching. So if you press down, we'll crouch. And then I think space is actually better than up for jumping, but you can make it up if you want. You could also do WASD instead of the arrow keys in space if you wanted. But I'm gonna go with that. So we'll just do this for now so that I can get the different modes changed. And then what I'll say is if event, because obviously we need it to go back to idling. So I'll say if event.key is equal to pygame.keyUp. And then if that's the case, we want mode to go equal to 0. So this is if you were going right or you were going left or you were crouching and you let go of the key, then it'll release. And obviously you may be thinking ahead here and saying, well, jump's going to be a little different. And that's true. We're just trying to get to a mostly functional animation, and then we'll start tweaking it. Okay, so now let's create a function below this player blit, or actually let's do it above. And we'll call it update player. So we're going to want to get active back from a function that we call update player. And what we need to do in there is we need to send in the mode, and we also want to create a variable called count. So we're going to count how long it's been in one key or another while it is in various states. So we're going to need a new variable called count, and let's go ahead and make the update player function. So define update player, and we said we're passing in 2 variables. We're passing in mode, which I'll just call MOD in this one, and then I'll say counter. So typically it's best to use different variable names inside of functions than they exist in the outside world. It just clarifies things. And then when I make a function, if I already said it's going to be returning things, I like to return them right before I even write the code so I don't forget to put return statements in. Okay, so first thing we'll do is we'll say if counter has gotten greater than or equal to 60. So we'll reset what state you're in every second. And these are, again, the specific numbers I put in for the counter and things like that, you can play around with to change the speed of your animation and things like that. But now let's go ahead and start saying stuff. So if mode is equal to 0, that's idling, right? But we have 2 idle images. So what I want to do is say if the counter is less than 30, so every half second, then I want to set active equal to 0. So that's idle 1, right? But then if counter is greater than or equal to 30 and counter is less than 60, then we want active to be equal to 1. So think about their key indexes in here. Idle 1, idle 2 is 0 and 1. And what this is going to do is while we're idle, every second it's going to cycle through those 2 things. Okay, but now there's a nice way we can simplify that expression. And indentation is not a multiple of 4. Uh-oh. Yeah, I guess I had everything over indented. That's okay. We'll fix that real quick. Alrighty. If you're using a good IDE, sometimes it can format things for you. Okay, and we can steal this pretty nice code here from mode 0, and we can use it for modes 1 and 2, because those are the other ones that get animated. So here's if you're going left or you're going right. Then we're going to, the only difference now is we're not using 0 and 1 for our active keys anymore. If it's right, we want to use 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So right is 1, and we'll oscillate between 6 and 7. And then if we're going left, we want to go between 4 and 5. Okay, so that should handle left and right. And then the next 2 are just going to be really easy, because if mode is 3, then we are jumping, and we put jumping in actually spot 3. So that one's a happy coincidence. And then we'll say if mode is equal to 4, which is crouching, and then this one is in spot 2 in our keyframes. So this is how we handle flipping between the different keys in different modes. And then what we want to do is no matter what, we want to add 1 to the count, and that's how we make sure that we basically go through this entire counter. We go through this entire function every second. Basically, we go from 0 to 60 every second because we're controlling the frames per second. And so this is going to tick or run 60 times per second. So let's go ahead and just run that, see what we did yet. Event has no object key. I don't believe you. If event.type is pygame.key down. Oh, this needs to be if event.type is pygame key up. There we go. Okay, so he's just standing still, and we'll cover that in a second, but let's see if we can go left or right. And I cannot. All right, let's do a little troubleshooting. Okay, I'm a dummy. So this isn't supposed to be active. This is supposed to be active frame. There we go. Let's take a look at that now. So we can see just standing idle, he's already moving, and that's kind of fun. So let's go right, and we can see he's moving to the right, which is neat. He's moving to the left, which is cool if I hold down left. Now let's crouch. Nice. And let's go ahead and press the space bar, and he's jumping. So obviously we haven't added the actual controls for movement yet, but we have added his ability to be in all these different states. So he's in the air jumping, which is fun. He's moving to the right, and as you hold it, he'll oscillate between the 2. And then if you hold it down, he's in a crouched mode, and if you just leave him idling, he still goes back and forth between 2 positions. So these are the super fun basics of animation. Hopefully that's what you wanted from this video. If you do want to hang out a little bit longer, I'll go ahead and actually add the controls to get him moving left and moving right and jumping and crouching, so you can see how we tie it all together. But if that's all you wanted from this video, please be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel before you go. If there's something in particular you want to see a tutorial on, go ahead and let me know about in the comments below. Otherwise, let's keep rocking and rolling. So the first thing I think we should do, and probably the easiest motion, is let's add left and right, because it's pretty straightforward. So what we'll do is we'll come up and we'll create a new variable, and we'll call it x speed, and we'll just set equal to 2 for the initial. But we already have such a situation where we tell him to move left and move right. And so what we'll do is we'll go below the event handling, and we'll just say if mode is equal to 1, right? So that's when we are telling them to move right. What we'll check is if the player's X position, and we're going right for this. So if the player's X position plus X speed, which is how fast we're moving, if that's greater than the width, and the thing is, since we have this guy scaled 150, we also have to add the width of the actual player because its original position is to the left of the character. So this is going to be player X plus X speed plus the width of your actual image. And as long as that's less than the width, sorry, I have greater in here. So if that's less than the width, then what we're going to do is we're going to do player X plus equals. So we're just adding X speed to the player. And I actually think 2 is kind of slow. Let's go ahead and make it 4, just so we can move a little bit better. And this is basically saying, first, before we move the player, we check that he's not moving off screen. So we're going to bound the player by being on the screen. You could actually let the player go off the screen if you wanted to. And then we're going to do almost exactly the same thing for 2, but this time it's going left. So what we need to check is if the player minus X speed, and then this time what we want to check that it's greater than 0. And we don't have to add the width of the player here because the coordinate is checking its left edge already. And then we'll subtract X speed from it. So this should be all we have to do to go left and right and have him limited by the screen. Yeah. So what you are going to notice if you're following along or if you have a similar project going is your left and right may not always be perfect. The images that you have in there might be slightly wider than the actual character. So what you might need to do, which I'm going to do here, is you might need to just add like a fudge factor. So we scaled the image to be 150 wide, but that animation just looks better if I give 30K of padding, 30 pixels of padding in both directions. You'll see he actually gets to what looks like the left edge of the screen now. And the little alien guy gets to what's actually looks like the right edge of the screen now. And so you can play around with those exact padding dimensions. You just don't want them to go full on off the screen. All right, so I mentioned a little bit earlier that jumping is going to be kind of different, kind of difficult. So far we've got left and right just about done, and I think crouching is done as is because it's really just a visual. We don't actually have to move his Y coordinate because of how we drew the pixel. But if you were to add like dodging a bullet using crouch, you would have to actually update the size of the rectangle he's in. So that you had like obviously a bullet at his height here wouldn't hit him here. If that's something you're interested in seeing in a future tutorial, I could maybe expand upon that. But let's focus on jumping now. So to create the jump, we're going to create a few new variables. I'm going to create a variable called gravity. I'm just going to make it equal to 0.4 initially. I'm going to make a true false Boolean variable called in air, and I'll make it false initially. And then we're going to create, kind of like we had X speed, we're going to create a variable called Y change, okay? And that'll be equal to 0 in the beginning. So let's go ahead and go down to the event handling and let's add a few conditions. So let's say you press space. We only want it to make you jump if you're not in the air already. So we'll add this and not in air. And you have the option of letting the person move left or right in the air or not if you want. But if you wanted to say like, well, once you've jumped, you're not in control of like moving, which is technically how gravity works, then you could add and not in air for that other stuff too. You could add it for all of them. So you could actually just add it up here as a condition too, because you could say like, well, if I'm in the air, it's out of my hands, and you could just say if I press a key and I'm not already in the air. But I'll put it on each line like this. Okay, so let's say you press the space bar and you're not in the air. Well, the first thing we'll do is we'll say, okay, now you're in the air. And then we're going to add to that Y change. So we'll say it's equal to -10. And the reason for that is the PyGame drawing coordinate system, the top left is 0, 0. And so as you go down, you're actually getting higher Y values. And so -10 is actually moving it up the screen. And then we'll set mode equal to 3. And we'll also say and not in air, because we want the mode to stay 3 while he's in the air. Okay, so now let's come down below and let's add conditions to what should happen here. So let's say player Y should get the Y change added to it. Okay, so this is how we use gravity and the Y change to actually move the player up the screen. And then what we'll say is if you're in the air, then we want Y change to be impacted by gravity every scan. So if we initially set equal to 10, one scan later it'll be, or -10, one scan later it'll be 9.6, and then 9.2, and then 8.8, and this will give us a really satisfying like parabolic effect. And you can also change how effective or how not effective a jump is by changing this initial value and changing the strength of gravity in your game. Okay, so you can use both to affect like how large a jump you have. And then what we'll do next is we'll say if the player Y coordinate has gone past 200, so you've gone basically farther down the screen than the initial starting position, we'll just use that as the time to reset. So player Y equals 200. So we'll put them back at the initial spot. We'll set Y change equal to 0, and we'll set in air back to false, and we'll set the mode back to 0. So that'll kind of complete the jump. And you definitely could put stuff like this all inside of your update player function and update their positions in a function as well. It's not a bad idea, but let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. So I'm going to press the space bar, and you can see we get the super kind of fun, I think it's fun, but I drew it, the fun looking guy in the air jumping. And again, you can kind of affect if that's too high a jump or too low a jump. You can affect it by changing gravity and the Y change speed. So all right, so we have left, we have right, we have duck, we have jump, and that's the basics of how to go from like a completely like made up pixel image to drawing your frames, importing into PyGame, and creating an animated character. So I hope you found it useful. Again, if you did, thank you so much for watching the channel. Be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe for future content. It helps me out a ton as I'm pretty new and I'm trying to crank out a ton of great quality content for you guys. If there's any questions you have about what you saw in here, I could have done something better, or you want to see something specific in a future video, just let me know about it in the comments below. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And as always, good luck with your projects, and thanks for watching. Thanks. Bye.